Welcome to a special edition of On the Rocks. As you can tell from my voice, I am not your usual host, Emily King. My name is Gautam Iyer, and I'm the head of corporate development here at Prospector, and we'll be hosting today's special edition. For today's episode, we have with us James Sykes, uranium geologist and the CEO of Baseload Energy, as well as the CEO of Metal Energy, both companies listed on the TSXV. James brings 10 years of Athabasca Basin uranium exploration and discovery experience, most notably from prominent roles for NextGen Energy's Arrow deposit, and having provided invaluable work on Hathor's Rough Rider deposits. James has been involved with the discovery of over 500 million pounds of U3O8 in the Athabasca Basin. Most recently, his team at Baseload was responsible for the near-surface high-grade uranium Akio deposit discovery. James, that's a lot of discoveries. Welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, Gautam. Yeah, it is. It is quite a lot of discoveries. I'm fortunate to have been a part of so many in such a little time frame.
Perfect. First things first, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a classic drink. It's called water. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but I'm drinking it out of a mug that was formed out of an ox horn.
That's amazing. That's a lot fancier than what I'm drinking here, which is just in a tiny yellow can. It's sparkling water beverage, pineapple flavored.
I've got no flavoring, so you got me beat on that one.
There we go. James, my goal for today's conversation is to get a holistic picture of the uranium industry, to look at uranium from multiple angles. So, to kick this off, I'd like to talk about the very basics of uranium. What is it and why is it important in our everyday lives?
Uranium, in its simplest sense, is power. It's the fuel that goes into nuclear energy, and that's really what it's all about. And nuclear energy is what I humbly believe is the greenest and safest baseload energy power that we have available to all of human civilization. So it's a key. Uranium's a key ingredient for powering our technologically increasing world moving forward.
I'd like to dive a little deeper into the whole clean energy space. We do have some common misconceptions when it comes to uranium and nuclear energy in general. Could you elaborate on how uranium and nuclear energy, for that matter, is clean?
It has no CO2 emissions. Straight up, it's no CO2 emissions. And when you look at the track record of nuclear energy, it is very safe. You can count the amount of major incidents on one hand. Fukushima was, in essence, not a flawed design on the reactor side, but it was a flawed location. If you had an oil refinery or even a solar field at where the Fukushima site was, and that tsunami hit, then you'd have all this debris floating in the ocean. You'd have all of this. You'd have oil spilled everywhere. Regardless of what was there, it was a disaster just waiting to happen. It just so happened that it was nuclear, and now it is what it is. That plant was apparently built before plate tectonics were even conceived. So that's something else to consider, is that we've come a long way in about 60 years understanding what causes tsunamis in the first place. So now that we know tsunamis are directly related to earthquakes and faults in the ocean, I would like to believe that nobody would be putting nuclear plants right on the ocean fronts where tsunamis can get them. They're safer inland. And then it's when you look at the major incidences that people always refer to, it's three of them: Fukushima, which we just discussed, 3 Mile Island. Nothing really happened there. And Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a flawed design. Everybody admits that in the industry, and we haven't gone back to that. So since Chernobyl, have there been any global meltdowns? Not that I can think of. Yeah, I've seen more pictures of burning windmills that were just put up in the last 5 years than I have of any nuclear incident. So in that regards, it is definitely safe. And when you want to consider the green aspect of things, a nuclear power plant has a very small footprint, and it only requires uranium as its primary fuel and not a lot of it. Whereas to go renewables or things like that, huge footprints, massive footprints. So we're giving away farming land or other areas to put up renewable powers, and the amount of metals that are required, and mining has gone up exponentially just to satisfy the renewable viewpoint.
Absolutely. And, I've read in many occasions that the energy density of a uranium pellet, for example, versus other sources of coal, I mean, you just need one pellet to power massive amounts of things, as opposed to, having 150 gallons of oil, 20,000 cubic feet of natural gas.
I've got something here, actually, courtesy. I'm going to pitch Kanalaska Uranium here. Don't know if my camera can pick that up. So this square, if this cube was uranium oxide, UO2, if it were uranium oxide fuel, it would weigh 3 kilograms, which prevents the use of 400 tons of coal and saves 850 tons of CO2 emissions. It's also equivalent to 100 million kilowatt hours of carbon-free energy, so that's enough for the average home for 100 years. It prevents the use of 1,000 barrels of oil. That is the power of nuclear energy.
That's amazing. So why aren't we seeing more nations, adopt nuclear energy? Or are they?
We are. Yes, most certainly we are. We are seeing a larger deployment of nuclear energy in today's world, for sure. China's increasing, India's increasing, the Middle East have gotten their first reactors online. Europe's putting in more. The States have recently announced that they're going to go, they're going to look at establishing more nuclear fleet, and they haven't done really anything since the 1970s. So we're seeing a larger build out now than we have in the last 50 odd years, basically. Some countries and some places are retiring aging reactors. Some of them are getting another extent for 30 odd years, which again, renewables don't have the track record, the longevity that nuclear has. What's kept nuclear back for so long? Really, it's that fear. The people's, I don't want to sound rude, but it's misconception about nuclear energy and people's fear about a meltdown, potential meltdowns and things like that. A lot of those issues have been resolved with safer fuels, safer technology. The amount of shutdown protocols they have to prevent any disasters happening are phenomenal. Like, these are probably some of the safest technologies out there. And so we've really come a long way in the whole nuclear side of things, just safety-wise and even energy efficiency-wise, that I think now the nations are finally getting around to this, because they know that we can't meet these CO2 climate accords that we have in place without nuclear energy.
Oh, absolutely. And with that increased demand, I mean, this is a pretty good segue into talking about price a little bit. Are we seeing increased prices?
Yes, on all fronts. Not just the uranium spot price, which is what people typically track because it's the easiest thing to find. But you're seeing higher contract prices being signed by the producers, signing with the utilities. The SWU price and the conversion prices, those are increasing as well, and those are typically leading indicators to the price of uranium going up. Like everything cratered after Fukushima went down to multi-years low, basically a decade of very low prices that did not incentivize any mining whatsoever. Well, there was, but no new mining, or even a lot of the producers curtailed their productions. So it created a scenario in which, yes, we're seeing more nuclear build out. The demand is the highest it has ever been, and yet the supply is really at some of the lowest it's ever been. And there's a lag on the utility side of things to really get behind or get in front of everything and say, okay, we need to secure all of this fuel now. And so it's building up this supply-demand disequilibrium that has it has a lot of ramifications back to the whole 2004, 2008 scenario.
Absolutely. And what was it back then? The prices went up to what, 140 dollars a pound,
Yep.
approximately $135 a pound, approximately. I mean, will we ever see those levels again? At this rate, I anticipate yes. But I mean, what would it take for uranium prices to go back there?
The lack of supply, it will be the main catalyst, and that's what we're seeing right now. Is we've had a few of the largest producing mines taken offline permanently. Ranger in Australia is offline. Why am I forgetting the one in Africa? But anyway, the African mine is taken offline, and there's nothing immediately coming online. Maybe Global Atomics, maybe their deposit should be able to online, and Boss Energy in Australia with their ISR. But some of the ISRs can turn back on. Cameco's looking at bringing on McArthur River again, which I've heard a number of people say, "Oh, it's never coming back online." I never believe that, because they've got tons of resources down there, and infrastructure was already built. It didn't make sense not to go back into it. But yeah, McArthur's coming back online. Cigar Lake is still pumping out a lot. Kazakhstan can turn on more, but in the Kazakhstan point of view, they've also depleted the low-hanging fruit. So now everything they have to go after is a little bit more costlier, but they've still got plenty of uranium there. But it's still not as much as what it was back in the heyday, and when everybody was producing in 2000, between 2005 2008, you had a lot of producers, and we just don't have those levels back again.
No, absolutely. Is there some sort of incentive price that needs to be reached for these mines to come back online?
I keep hearing $60 minimum. Anywhere from $60 to $80 is a bare minimum. Some of these mines will even require $100 minimum to come back online. But it really depends on the amount of volume and the amount of supply that can be fed with the operations that operate around that $60 to $80 mark. And it's probably on the higher end of things. Even some of these some of the Athabasca contracts I've seen, they've been upwards of $70. So it's a good sign.
I'm happy you mentioned the Athabasca Basin, because I'd like to dig a little deeper there. When I think uranium, I think two things: the Athabasca Basin here in Saskatchewan and Kazakhstan. Geologically speaking, are they different? And if so, how?
Very much so. Yes, absolutely. Athabasca just seems to be different from everything else in the entire world anyway. But Kazakhstan's all what we call ISR. It's all roll front type of uranium. So it's uranium thin encrustations in a sandstone. If people don't know what a sandstone is, pretty sure everyone's walked on a beach. Just picture that sand that you're walking on being solidified, so your feet don't squish in it, but basically rock. It still has that porosity to it, so all the sand grains are touching, and whatever porosity is in there, that's where the uranium forms. So with ISR, you pump your fluid down to extract the uranium, leaving all the sand grains intact, and you recover it from a different well. Yeah, the Athabasca is much different, because ours are all structurally controlled, and there are some other geological features such as redox traps and the unconformity and the amount of fluids that have been pumped through that area naturally. But in the end, they are all structurally controlled, and what that has done has provided a fluid system to accumulate large concentrations of uranium, which is why the Athabasca Basin is known as the world's highest grade uranium jurisdiction by far. The average grade for an Athabasca deposit far exceeds the average global grade of uranium deposits. And that's what makes it so lucrative. We consider Cigar Lake and McArthur River. Back when McArthur was mining, when they first went down after the Pod 2, it had the highest average mined grades of any commodity really in the world. You can't even compare the value of what they were mining versus high grade gold, versus what Red Lake was mining at, or Goldcorp is mining up at Red Lake. The value of the uranium that comes out of Cigar Lake and McArthur River is mind blowing. There's no other commodity in the world that comes close to their value.
Absolutely. And, just as an example, when we're talking about high grades of these mines, we're talking percentage points as
Yeah,
opposed to tenths and maybe
yeah,
thousands of percentage points. So there's an
exactly.
order of magnitude difference when we're looking
When
at these
20,
grades.
yeah, 20% of the rock that you're mining is mineralized, that's a big number. That's 20% of a ton is all mineralization. Whereas you look at gold reports as 1 gram per ton, which is extremely tiny.
Yeah.
To put a gram per ton into percentage, that's point what, 0.00001, something like that.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
it's
think
not.
point zero zero one, in that order.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about mining methods, do we typically see the conventional methods out in Saskatchewan? I know you mentioned ISR over in Kazakhstan. Why would someone choose ISR over the conventional open pit or underground methods?
Yeah, of course there's differences all the way across the board. So ISR is typically the cheapest mode of extracting uranium, so long as the porosity is there and so long as the uranium grades are there. But like it's a no. There's no underground disturbance with ISR really. Everything's done from surface. You put in an injection well, you put in a recovery well, and fluids migrate through one up the other. So it's a pretty simplistic process. But you don't get you're not making a lot of uranium. You're not recovering a lot of uranium in a very quick time frame simply because the grades are typically low in those deposits. You've got hard rock mining, which is conventional mining, open pit, underground mining in Africa, in Russia, and we had it here in northern Saskatchewan in the Athabasca Basin area. Now, all of the original mines in Athabasca were all open pits or underground mines, conventionally mined. It wasn't until we started migrating in towards the deeper parts of the sandstone, where there's significant water infiltration, that the wheel had to be reinvented for mining. Both Cigar Lake and McArthur River are the only two underground mines in the actual Athabasca Basin itself. They both flooded twice because that basin is, as I mentioned, with the beach example, there's water still in that basin and it's still flowing, and quite a bit of it. So they both flooded twice, and they've had to develop methodology to deal with that. And what they've done is that if your ore body's here, they will actually put a freeze curtain over top in the sandstone so that that water from the sandstone cannot penetrate that freeze curtain. And that's a 24/7 operation, 365 days a year, that they got to keep those pumps going and really keep the ice. That's not cheap. But again, when you're mining out 20% average grades, it all makes sense. ISR is being tried with Denison Mines, and that's another good testimony to ways to look at mining deeper deposits within the Athabasca Basin. Completely unconventional, but a lot of credit due to Denison for trying this methodology and making some good headway on it. Orano has been looking at a different type of mining methodology, again, trying to avoid going underground in that sandstone and doing stuff from surface, and they call it Sabre, which is really jet boring, high-grade uranium and trying to recover. Both the ISR and the Sabre methodology are still in their trial runs. There's nothing definitive out of them yet, but when you go back to the history of everything, open pit mining is what has worked the best in the Athabasca Basin area.
So are companies now trying to focus a little bit more on, I guess, the more near surface deposit? I know, for example, baseload, you have your Athabasca 2.0 thesis. Could you speak a bit to that?
Yeah, I definitely could. I can't speak for other companies, but just looking at where people have staked, there's still a lot of desire to explore within the sandstone and try and make discoveries there. I'm of the opinion that we haven't even scratched the surface of the amount of discoveries that have been made in the Athabasca area. I think there's tons of uranium out there, absolutely wild amount, but you're gonna have to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and that's just not my flavor of the day. We're going back to the old tried, tested, and true methodology and realizing that you've got a significant amount of overburden cover. So what the glaciers left behind that obscure all of your bedrock. And you could have hidden a lot of deposits underneath that. They're called blind deposits simply because you can't see them with at surface or with any meaningful geophysical surveys. So radiometrics wouldn't pick these things up. You'd need to run geophysics, come up with a target area, and then drill it off. But that's our approach. That's our Athabasca 2 approach, is that we think there's a lot of near surface mineralization that has yet to be discovered that are all just waiting there underneath till, underneath some of these swamps that can prove to be a viable open pit deposit. And we call that strategy Athabasca 2.0. Really, it's Athabasca 0.0. We've gone back to the roots of mining, not exploration. And we seem to be the only company who have completely focused with the sole intent to focus on projects that are outside of the sandstone.
Absolutely. Now, as a CEO of a uranium exploration company and having discussed the supply-demand issues, are you seeing more capital flowing into the industry and specifically the uranium space?
For sure. Vasold listed in 2020.
Yeah.
There was a lot of ground you could have staked back then. There were not a lot of participants in the whole uranium space. I would say that there were probably around 50 uranium companies globally and exploring and producing. Now there's about 120. So we have more than doubled in the last 3 years, the amount of uranium companies globally.
Wow. What about, when you're trying to raise capital, when you're talking to the buy side funds or even retail, for example, are they buying into the Athabasca 2.0 thesis? Are they believers? Are they happy that you're going back, focusing on the basement rocks?
Yes, they are. They really appreciate the strategy and the theory and the thought process behind it all. And with our discovery that we made, which we call Accio, we're trying to prove that thesis to be correct, that you're not just making a discovery, you're discovering a mine. And those type of discoveries, as historically proven, have gone from discovery into production within an average of 6 to 12 years. Whereas a lot of these underground deposits, these deposits within the Athabasca themselves, some of them have been around since the 60s, 70s, 80s, even some of the more recent ones. So when you're reading off my bio there, when I'm working for Hathor, that was discovered in 2008 with, where is it now? It's still in the ground with absolutely no projection of moving it forward, just because it was 200 meters underneath the sandstone. So it's too deep to do any sort of conventional mining there. You'd need to do a freeze or something else like Sabre or ISR. But what we've been doing with our Accio discovery is moving it along quite nicely and very quickly. Our exploration costs are a fraction of what other people incur, just because we're not drilling as deep. And with mineralization being as shallow as 25 meters beneath the surface, that really has open pit potential. And to dig out a pit, you're not going down 100 meters and then start mining. You're removing overburden. You start mining right away. That has a very quick cash generative situation. It's a positive NPV scenario with a very quick return on investment, and basically even low capex, because we wouldn't build a mill ourselves. In theory, that we'd look to use the Key Lake mill, Cameco's Key Lake mill. So there's low capital costs, low operating costs, really make this a high margin project. Whereas, again, to go deeper in that sandstone, you've got a lot of front end capital costs, and your margins are not nearly as broad.
No, absolutely. Are you, here at Prospector, we deal a lot with numbers and analytics. Are you able to get more specific in terms of, general CapEx numbers that we can see, underground versus open pit?
I can't. It's unfortunate I can't, because I don't know any of the the legitimate costs from a lot of these underground operations or the historic operations, and even ourselves. We've got nothing solid. We've tried to crunch numbers internally without third-party reviews. And each time we do, we keep coming across less than $100 million Canadian for a capex to get all of this going. And when you put that, like, the biggest cost is the road. The road's going to cost, $1 million per kilometer, let's say. And we've got about, let's say we put in 40 kilometers of road. There's $40 million. What's after that? Machinery? That's not at $60 million. It's pretty straightforward and pretty easy for what we want to do. Again, which is why we think that the return on investment is extremely fast. We can make this happen. We can turn all of this around into a cash generating situation very quickly. What's $100 million equivalent to in uranium? If you've got a contract price of $70 a pound uranium, that's what, 1.5 million pounds of uranium USD is $105 at $70 a pound. There's your capex paid for with 1.5 million pounds. That's it. Yeah. You don't need these massive 100 million pound deposits or 200 million pound deposits. And it's all a business scenario. And when the margins are high and the return on investment is very quick, that's what makes sense. That's what generates cash immediately.
No, that's a very good point. What is it? I mean, what kind of magnitude of costs are we talking then when we're dealing with nuclear reactors and like the energy side of things? I'm guessing that is a massive amount of capital, and that's what might be taking a while for all these countries to start building their own reactors.
Yeah, around 2006 to 2010, there were a number of large-scale projects. So we're talking gigawatt power generating nuclear utilities, not megawatts, gigawatts. Right. And their cost overruns were just so high. Everything. I remember one project. I think they underestimated costs by 50% or 100%. I get that. And when you're dealing with billions of dollars worth of investment, tens to 13 billions of dollars, and someone comes back and says, "Oh, well, we significantly didn't price everything out properly, and it's going to cost us another 10 to 13 billion dollars," makes people think. And that was probably the biggest problem that really hindered nuclear deployment. But the industry's changed. There's been a lot of innovation in the industry, looking at small modular reactors or micro modular reactors. The technology has been around for a long time because we've got nuclear submarines, just nobody really put two and two together. But now that we are seeing these, the idea is that small modular reactors, SMRs, and micro modular reactors, MMRs, they can be deployed much quicker and more cost effectively. And once they pick up some steam and get processing, then you can start to incur some what do you call that, development or production line. You can get some production line reduction costs just because you start streamlining everything. So that's the benefit of what SMRs and MMRs provide. Plus they're incorporating all of the new technologies, so nuclear resistant fuels that are, well, I guess resistant to meltdowns and things like that, and avert all of that. The amount of safety features that are put in. But these things are, the theory behind all of these is that they can be deployed rapidly. They can be deployed within jurisdictions that are very remote or around cities and other communities. You can generate a lot of electricity from nuclear energy. Another feature that seems to be of benefit to an SMR or from people deploying SMRs is that they do produce a lot of heat as well, and that heat is now being looked at as another alternative for supplying nearby communities or even industries with additional heat.
Oh, that's interesting. That's very innovative. Now, I guess one thing we haven't really spoken about when it comes to nuclear energy is waste. How much waste is generated And then where do we store all this waste?
There's not a lot of waste generated.
No.
And again, like
There
going
we go.
back to the whole
That's
people's
another-
fear. No, it's crazy. It's what
Yep.
all of the nuclear waste in the world can fit within a football field or something, or maybe 3 football fields.
I
It's
read
nothing.
that as well.
Yeah, that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
That is the truth behind it. It's not a technology that generates a lot of waste. Even some of these reactors or some of the innovations that the nuclear industry is looking at is reusing some of that waste into additional nuclear reactor, and some of it is applied. So we can reduce, reuse, recycle type of idea. What's better than that? I grew up on that with Triple R.
Nothing more sustainable than that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So the nuclear waste is not a big thing. A number of countries across the globe do have their own nuclear waste depositories. There's even some new companies, I forget the name, but they're looking at doing deep underground drill holes, basically, that would put the waste back, in a very deep drill hole. So there are some advancements on the waste preservation side or the waste security side of things as well. But again, when you're looking at such a small scale, you put all the garbage dumps around the world together, and they will be they would eclipse the amount of nuclear waste that has been deployed. I would almost guarantee you can take all the waste from the renewable industry, from the solar panels that go into all the garbage dumps, all the wind turbines. I bet you any money you put all of those together out of the last 10 years, and you'd have more waste in those than you would from the nuclear industry since its inception. Almost guarantee it. And
That's amazing.
Nobody talks about solar panels having selenium in them. And if you've ever read about selenium going into your drinking water, that's a big no. That's a very toxic element. But it happens. A lot of solar panels have selenium in them. Where do they end up when they're done? Right in the waste pile. So now what's really bad out there? And that's misconception and people's refusal to just simply have a seat, have a sip, and just think things through.
Exactly. No, I think the nuclear industry gets a bad rep. Well, James, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just to kind of wrap things up, what are you up to this summer? What's your focus?
We're going to drill. Baseload is going to drill. We love Accio. Accio has a lot of open areas to increase mineralization. We've got some other target areas where we think there could be additional mineralization, so new pods being formed. And we also want to do a little bit of infill drilling and definition drilling, because we want to really, again, move this along so we can get to a resource estimate. And once we have that, then we can really start putting some numbers to paper and trying to figure out the feasibility behind everything that we have. And just I'm adamant about moving this forward. So yeah, this year 10,000 meter drill program, which is half of what we drilled last year. Again, that's the benefit of our exploration strategies, that we don't need a lot of drill holes, we don't need a lot of meters, so it's much more cost effective to explore for these type of deposits. And yeah, hopefully 4 months of drilling will keep us going for the 10,000 meters, and then we'll have results.
Perfect. That sounds like a busy summer.
If there's one thing that you wish for in the uranium space, or mining space in general, what is it?
There's no one thing. There's so many things. You know what? I like seeing what I'm seeing now. 2 years ago, you mentioned nuclear energy and people would have spat in your face. And now those same people, you mentioned nuclear energy, they'll turn around and say, oh, I've always loved nuclear energy. But I like the idea that people are finally coming around and supporting it. If something else happens in the nuclear industry, they're all going to turn right back and spit in your face. But so long as that people are there now, hopefully that they will continue to really immerse themselves and just understand that this is our path forward. I've seen a lot of money being funded into technologies that don't make sense and have never proven to work. Not to punt on fusion at all, but billions billions of dollars have gone into fusion when we've got fission, nuclear energy at our disposal, and we walked away from it. If we put the same amount of investments into a viable, known, operating nuclear source, instead of something that we're trying to develop for myths and dreams, we wouldn't be having these issues that we're having right now. We wouldn't be having these CO2 emissions or these greenhouse gas emissions that we're worried about. We wouldn't have these energy security issues that we're all going on about and seeing blackouts happen in cities across multiple countries. We'd all be living in a world where you can turn on the light whenever the heck you want, and it would be there.
That sounds like a wonderful world.
It does, doesn't it?
I'm pro uranium, very bullish on uranium. Uranium is the future. Thanks, James. Thanks a lot for hopping on with us today on the Rocks podcast. Very, very good learning experience. A lot of great knowledge you have given us about uranium and nuclear energy in general. So thank you again, and hope to keep in touch.
Thanks, Gotham. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.